I'm Dr. Scott Luper. I'm the medical director for White Spruce Medical here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And we've developed a protocol to improve your chances of surviving COVID-19. Now, it's not proven. There is no evidence saying this is going to actually make a difference. And yet, the protocol was developed using research that exists for other coronaviruses. It's not like we just pick things out of the air. We literally combed through the research and found the things that were most promising, also things that are easily obtainable, also things that have very low toxicity associated with them, and came up with a protocol. Now what's happened is we're starting to get corona cases, people are getting COVID-19 here in Fairbanks, and everybody's living. Everybody who's gone through this program, they're all getting light cases. Now this doesn't prove anything, and yet it makes us more confident about what we're talking about. It makes us more excited about making recommendations for this particular protocol. But the question has come up: what are the possible toxicities associated with each one of the ingredients in this protocol? So here's the protocol. It's real brief. It's 10,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. It's 12,000 milligrams of fish oil a day. It's 20 milligrams of melatonin at bedtime. It's either 30 or 50 milligrams of zinc. I'm not real particular about it. Zinc's kind of a B list item on this one. It's not a linchpin by any means, but some normal dose of zinc. And then finally, mushrooms. Now, the mushroom availability is, I don't know what it is where you're living. Here in Fairbanks, what we have a lot of is chaga. It's a mushroom that grows on the birch trees. And that's what we actually have here in the clinic. So we're mostly recommending chaga. The best research comes from reishi mushrooms, but really it's strong flavored mushrooms that have a lot of mushroomness to them. Those ones tend to work better. But really any mushroom, even the button mushrooms you get at the grocery store, have some value here. And what we're doing with the mushrooms, it depends on the form of this. If we're doing a tea, which a lot of times we do, it's a cup of tea 3 times a day. If we're doing a tincture, which is the alcohol extract, and we're recommending 2 dropperfuls, which is about 60 drops, in a cup of tea 3 times a day. And if it's a powder, we're recommending 3 capsules. That tends to be about 900 milligrams twice a day. That's the recommendation for the mushrooms. Basically, the mushrooms boils down to a couple of good solid doses twice a day. So let's talk about now why we included these items. And again, I mentioned this earlier. First of all, they're commonly available. In fact, a lot of people just have them at home already. You didn't have to go to the store. You could just look in your kitchen cupboard and find, or wherever you keep your vitamins and find them. And the other thing is each and every one of these have a very low toxicity associated with them. So let's go through them one at a time and talk about the possible toxicity. Let's do vitamin D first. If you take too much vitamin D, it can become toxic. Vitamin D is very important for the absorption of calcium. Of course, we know that. It builds bones. And if your calcium levels get too high in your bloodstream, you can start getting side effects from that. Mostly it's cramping. Starts off as digestive system cramping, but it can get into muscle cramping. It could really, at some point, get to be really a big problem. But here's the big but on this thing. The fact of the matter is it's hard to get to vitamin D toxicity. It really is. It's not an easy thing to do. I have patients right now taking 25,000 IUs a day, and it's fine. They've been doing it for years, and their blood levels are totally normal. So if you were to take very high levels, let's say 200,000-300,000 IUs of vitamin D, what would you expect to happen daily? What do you expect to happen? I don't know, in a month or 2, you'd start getting some stomach cramps, which would go away as soon as you quit taking the vitamin D. There's one example comes from California where a manufacturer who used vitamin D in his formula, he had some kind of muscle building formula. Somehow or other the factory put too much vitamin D in the stuff, and he was taking it himself, and he was getting 1 million international units, 1 million IUs a day for a month. And then eventually he got stomach cramps. He went to the doctor. It puzzled them at first, but then eventually figured out that his calcium levels were too high, and he did some other investigation and found out the vitamin D levels were 1 million IUs per day. And so they had him quit taking the formula that his company was making, and the problem went away. So yeah, the toxicity is pretty low on that one. Now let's talk about fish oil. The fish oil recommendation I'm doing is a pretty big one. Normally people take a capsule or 2 of fish oil a day and call it good. And what I'm asking folks to do is to take a tablespoon of fish oil. It turns out that really at a tablespoon you're getting the maximum benefit. And the reason why we're having people do fish oil, and this is not about the reasons why we're having people do this thing, but I can't help but say that. The reason why we're doing the fish oil is because it's anti-inflammatory and helps people get through the cytokine storm, helps decrease the amount of inflammation, particularly in the lungs. Now, it's not the best anti-inflammatory ever, and we don't want it to be, because we don't want to shut down inflammation. We just want to dial it down a bit. We don't want your immune system shut off. We just want it not to go off the rails and get an exaggerated response. So fish oil's helpful in that way. It keeps things in the middle, and it's not too high, not too low. So if you take too much fish oil, what you get is just too much oil for your body to absorb, and you end up getting greasy poop that floats. So, and if you were particularly sensitive to fish oil, it will thin your blood, and you could actually get thinner blood, and maybe if you got cut, you'd bleed more than you normally would. But it's not overly dangerous. It's not like taking drugs that inhibit your coagulation. So it's like, man, now we're trying to squint and imagine what the possible things would be. Bottom line is, if you take too much fish oil, you're going to burp fish. That really is realistically the biggest problem associated with fish oil. Okay, now let's talk about melatonin. So melatonin helps balance our immune system. The evidence is actually good that it's going to help blunt this cytokine storm. So again, toxicity with melatonin, there is none. Not that I could find any whatsoever. I mean, a normal dose for melatonin is 3 milligrams. We're asking people to take 20 milligrams, so it's a pretty significant dose. And there's really no side effects that I've noticed from it. There's been people that have taken as much as 1,600 milligrams, and the only thing that they reported was being a little tired. Now, it could be that somebody has an unusual reaction to melatonin. I've had some people get really tired when they took melatonin more than they should. So it's possible that you could have an allergic reaction to something, or there's any number of things along those lines. But in terms of real toxicity, there is none. So, I mean, if you're trying to kill yourself, if you use melatonin, you're using the wrong thing. Don't even try. That's not going to work. Now, zinc, we got a chance of getting toxicity with that one because zinc's a metal. A lot of times if you get too much metal in your body, it can wreak havoc. I mean, there's all kinds of toxic metals, mercury and cadmium and maybe aluminum, iron for that matter. If you get levels of iron too high, it wreaks havoc in your body. Except when you actually look at the research on zinc and the reports of it, they're weak in terms of toxicity. Zinc is not actually that toxic. You get super high levels of zinc fumes, for example, and it could, like if you're welding galvanized metal, which I don't recommend to do, you can get a lot of zinc and it can cause a difficulty in breathing and those kind of things, but that's a weird situation. What we're really talking about is can I get toxicity taking zinc from a bottle or eating the whole bottle? And the answer is, you can get a stomach upset a little bit, but really no, the toxicity of zinc is really low. Now, there's one other thing I want to mention. If you take large amounts of zinc every day, you can drive down copper. Zinc competes with copper for absorption. And if you flood your system with zinc, then you don't get enough copper. And we need copper. We need a little bit of copper. So if you're going to take large amounts of zinc for a long time, you need to compensate by adding copper into your routine. But we're not talking about taking large amounts of zinc for a long period of time. We're just basically recommending people do this program while the COVID virus is going hot and heavy. So, I mean, if you're going to take this more than 2 or 3 months, I'd say add copper in. And really what you want to do is you want to add 1 milligram of copper for every 15 milligrams of zinc. So if you're taking 30 milligrams of zinc, you're taking 2 milligrams of copper. You're taking 45 milligrams of zinc, you're taking 3 milligrams of copper, like that. The math is pretty easy. But the toxicity, again, is quite low. The last element of the protocol is mushrooms. And this one, I could talk on and on and on about what mushrooms do, and I'm not going to have that conversation because what we're talking about is the toxicity. And actually, the toxicity of mushrooms is very low. I mean, think about it. They sell them at the grocery store. People buy them in bags and fry them up and eat them. They're not very toxic. Now, admittedly, there are some mushrooms that are highly toxic. Don't eat those kind. Those are severe toxicity. Common sense. Those are not good. Don't eat them. But the mushrooms we're talking about are not toxic, so you'll be fine with them. Now, admittedly, they're not necessarily plant, but they're organic material, and you could possibly get an allergic reaction from them. It's a possibility. It's rare. I can't think of a single example, but not in my practice, but it's theoretically possible. So that could be one thing that would get in the way. But other than that, really, we're not talking about any toxicity. And the levels we're talking about taking it is well under any possible toxicity levels. So yeah, the toxicity is super low. Okay, now let's talk about vitamin C. Now, vitamin C is not part of the protocol. Yeah, it could be. You know, vitamin C tends to calm our immune system down a bit. What it does is actually quenching the chemicals. Let me back up a little bit. It's the white blood cells have these chemicals they use for killing. They put them in these little packages called vacuoles, and when they get close to the target, they pop the little packages, these little balls of poison, and they'll pop a bunch of them all at the same time. You know, a score or two of these things, and what they'll do is they'll kill a swath in front of them, and usually themselves at the same time. It's kind of a suicide mission. So vitamin C doesn't stop the killing, but it stops the collateral damage. It's an antioxidant, so it tends to quench up some of the toxicity of these chemicals. And so really, it's rather weak. It doesn't really do that much. It's not super helpful, so it didn't make the grade. And yet, it's out in the world. People know that vitamin C is helpful for our immune system. So the question comes up a lot, what about the toxicity of vitamin C? And the answer is, toxicity? What toxicity? Vitamin C isn't toxic at all. But, oh wait, Dr. Luper, if you take too much vitamin C, you get diarrhea. Isn't that toxicity? Oh no, it's not. What it is, it's an osmotic balance problem. We can only absorb so much vitamin C. Our bodies just don't have an infinite capacity to soak it up like a sponge. So it soaks up as much as it can, that is the lining of your digestive system. And what it doesn't soak up, it passes through. Now when it hits your colon, and if it's not soaked up, vitamin C acts like a sugar. Really, and vitamin C is very similar to sugar molecularly. The glucose ring is identical to a vitamin C ring, except for vitamin C has this little dingle-dongle that hangs off to the side. If you had a glass full of vitamin C, because it's a liquid, it pours like Caro corn syrup. And when it lands on the table, it's sticky like corn syrup. And if you touch some to your tongue, it'd be weird because instead of being sweet, it's really sour. But it has this sugar-like quality, and sugar attracts water in our system. If you chug tons of sugar and it didn't get absorbed, what it would do is it would act like an osmotic sponge. It attracts water to it to dilute it. It's just basic chemistry is what it is. And when you get too much vitamin C, it attracts the water, and now you just have a colon that's full of water, and what happens is it dumps out. So you get diarrhea. So if you take too much vitamin C, what you'll get is diarrhea. It's not really toxicity, it's just an osmotic imbalance is what it is. I want to thank you for your questions. They really are quite helpful. Sometimes it's hard for me to see what people are thinking or know what people are thinking because, you know, I'm a doctor and I see things from my own point of view. It really is quite helpful for these questions to come in and the way it keeps it real. I really appreciate that. We're paying attention, we're reading them, and that's why we're doing the video today to get back to people on this. So, here's my request. Keep the questions coming in, keep engaged, and what I want you all to do is, number 1, stay safe. Number 2, stay healthy. Number 3, stay in touch.